Have you ever given any thought to how coffee gets to you, what has to be done to it in order for it to get to the store, to get on your shelf, to be put in your machine, to be brewed, and for you to enjoy? Well, there's a lot of things that need to happen. You know, sometimes we bring a coffee in that our customers really love. So we'll keep it around for as long as we can. And then we can't get it anymore. And they're like, well, I don't understand. Coffee's always on the shelf in the grocery store. Yeah, it is. But in specialty coffee, we're dealing harvest to harvest. When a harvest is gone, it's gone. Coffee is an agricultural product. And there's a lot that has to happen to the raw beans after they're picked off after they're picked off the coffee tree in order for you to enjoy it. Today, I'm going to walk you through there's several different methods of processing coffee beans, so they'll be good to go for you to roast and enjoy. The first method I'm going to talk to you about is called the natural method. It's also known as dry processing. It's the oldest method, been around a long time, right from the beginning. It's one of the simplest ways to process coffee cherries. Here's how it works. Number one, only the ripest cherries are picked from the coffee plants or trees, either by hand or in some cases, like in the large farms in Brazil, by mechanical methods. Then the cherries are dried, okay? Instead of removing the fruit, the outer pulp of the coffee cherry right away, the entire cherry is laid out to dry in the sun. It's often done on raised drying beds. You see that a lot in Africa, or patios, and you see that a lot in Central America, to allow airflow around the cherries and prevent mold and fermentation issues. The cherries are spread out in a thin layer and turned regularly to ensure even drying. Now, as fate had it, I have some of these right here, and you can see them. These are dried coffee cherries. We got these from an El Salvadoran coffee farmer at Coffee Fest. So that's kind of what they look like after they're dried out. Drying time. Can take several weeks, depending on the climate, of course, for the cherries to reach the moisture content that they need to reach, about 10 to 12%. That during this time, the sugars and the flavors in the fruit interact with the coffee beans, contributing to the final taste profile. The next step is hulling. They take the outer body of the cherry off. The outer layer, skin, pulp, and parchment are mechanically removed to reveal the coffee beans inside. And then the beans are sorted and graded to remove any defects. And I talked about defects a few videos ago, ensuring only the highest quality beans move on to roasting. The natural method often results in coffee with fruity and complex flavor notes. That's why a lot of your African coffees have a fruitiness to them. Most of those are natural processed. The prolonged contact between the bean and the fruit during drying is what contributes to that. It's also a very meticulous process. Workers have to be very careful to rake the beans, make sure that they're dry evenly, and that no mold or off flavors develop. The next method, and we often see this out of coffees in Indonesia, and it's specifically because of the climate. It's very humid in Indonesia, and that has forced them to change the way that they process the beans. The next method is called the wet hold method. It's also known in Indonesia, they call it giling basah. Giling basah. It's a unique coffee processing technique primarily used in Sumatra, Sulawesi, Bali, East Timor, countries in Indonesia. The first thing they do is they take the ripe coffee cherries after they've harvested them. The outer skin is removed using a depulper, leaving the mucilage, the body of the cherry, still attached to the beans. The beans with mucilage undergo brief fermentation, usually overnight, to loosen the mucilage, that body of the cherry. After fermentation, they are washed to remove most of the mucilage, leaving a small amount still clinging to the parchment layer. And then they are partially dried. The beans, still encased in the parchment layer, are dried to a moisture level of around 30 to 40%, which is lower than most other processing methods where the beans are dried much further before the hulling stage, before they take that off the the parchment off. Then the wet hulling occurs, and that's where the name comes from. The beans are whole. That parchment layer is removed while they are still wet and soft, which is unique to this method. This gives the beans their characteristic appearance with a dark greenish blue color. Final drying. After hulling, the beans are dried further to reach the ideal moisture level of about 10 to 12%. The wet hold process, and this is typical of Indonesian coffees, tend to produce coffee with earthy, herbal, and full-bodied flavor profiles. Those are some of my favorites, people. Indonesian coffees are fantastic. It's especially well-suited to the humid climate of Indonesia, like we said, as it allows for faster drying compared to other methods. It's distinctive to its region and contributes to the unique flavor characteristics of Indonesian coffees. If you haven't tried Indonesian coffees, you've got to do it, especially Sumatra, Bali, some of those other Indonesian countries. Their coffee is so good. The wash process is next, okay? It's also known as the wet process. It is one of the most common and widely used methods for processing coffee. And before I get into it, I want to put this out. Roast Magazine did a study. They published an article, I don't know, 6 or 8 months ago. It was really fascinating. They looked at the way that these different processing methods affect the flavors and the tastes of the coffee. What they did is they cupped coffees right as soon as they were ready, and they assigned them a score. Then they'd wait 3 or 4 days, and they'd do it again, and they'd assign a score. Now, coffee beans will reach their peak flavor at about 6 or 7 days, and they'll peak for about 7 days. But with the wash process coffees, 14 to even 30 days after the coffee was roasted, the cup scores were just as high at 30 days as they were in the beginning. So the wash process is really popular. We see it a lot in the coffees that we bring in. Anyway, let me get into the wash process. Just like in other methods, the ripe coffee cherries are harvested by hand or machine. Then they're depulped, just like the others. The outer skin and most of the fruit are removed from the cherries using a depulping machine. Leaves the beans covered in a thin layer of sticky mucilage. Then the beans are fermented in tanks, with water to break down and remove the remaining mucilage. The process can take anywhere from 12 to 48 hours, depending on factors like temperature and humidity. After fermentation, the beans are thoroughly washed to remove any residue. It's typically done with clean water in channels or specialized washing equipment. Then the beans have to be dried. Okay, before a bean can be roasted, it's got to be dried. Okay, the washed beans, still encased in their parchment layer, are spread out to dry in the sun on drying beds or patios. Also, sometimes mechanical dryers are used. It doesn't happen all that often, but it does happen. The beans are dried until they reach a moisture content of about 10 to 12%. Every time we bring a raw coffee in from our supplier, the moisture content is right there at about 10 to 12%. So when you're roasting the coffees, to give you an idea of what the roasting process does, when we do it in batches of 2.9 pounds, okay, that's before we roast them. After roasting, we get about 2.3 pounds back because we're actually dehydrating the beans, taking that extra 10 to 12% of moisture that's left in the beans, and we're roasting that out, okay? The washed beans are still encased in a parchment layer, spread out to dry in the sun on drying beds or patios. Alternatively, mechanical dryers may be used. Gets them down to that 10 to 12%. Once dried, the parchment layer is removed to expose the green coffee beans, which are then sorted and graded for quality. The wash process is known for producing clean and bright flavor profiles with pronounced acidity. Acidity in coffee is not a bad thing, okay? Some people take it as that. But acidity in coffee is not a bad thing. It produces a boldness, a boldness really that separates that coffee from others. It allows the intrinsic characteristics of the coffee bean, such as its origin and varietal, and there's thousands of varietals. We're not going to get into that, to shine through without the influence of the fruit. Okay, now there's one more process, or actually two more, but I want to hit this one hard because Some of the honey processed coffees that we've brought in have been some of the most popular. Okay, so the honey process, it's an intermediate method between the natural and wash processes, and it's widely loved for producing sweet, balanced coffees. What they do is the coffee cherries are harvested, outer skin is removed, like we talked about. Unlike the wash process, the sticky fruit mucilage is left partially or entirely on the beans. Okay, there's 3 different levels, so to speak, of honey processing. Okay, they're spread out to dry on raised beds, patios, or drying tables. Now, there's yellow honey, where there's very little mucilage remaining and drying is faster. There's red honey, and one of our most popular coffees, the Dominican Republic Ramirez Red Honey, was like this. And red honey, more mucilage is left. Drying takes longer, can add richer flavors, and boy, did it ever. That was a great coffee. And then black honey. Most or all of the mucilage is retained, requiring meticulous care during drying. When I talk about meticulous care, workers are out there turning the beans to ensure the even drying and prevent mold. The process can take weeks. Sometimes, the beans will sit out there dry for 2, 3, 4 weeks at a time. And it really depends on the amount, depends on the weather and the amount of mucilage. Once dried, the parchment layer is removed from the beans, revealing the green coffee beans underneath. The honey process often results in coffees with fruity and syrupy characteristics, a sweet profile reminiscent of honey, therefore the name, and a body that's fuller than washed but cleaner than natural processed coffee. Okay. Again, I love honey processed coffees. They're just fantastic, and our customers really love the honey processed coffees that we bring in. Okay, there's one more I want to talk about, and it's important because our current premium origin of the quarter, Costa Rica Montano Micro Mill Anaerobic, long name, but we don't name them. Okay, that's on the supplier or the grower. It's an anaerobically processed coffee, and this is kind of an innovative technique. You don't see it a lot, but it's catching on. Here's how the anaerobic technique works. Ripe coffee cherries are picked and sorted to ensure only the best cherries are used. And really, if you want consistent quality in an anaerobically processed coffee, this step is critically important. Only the ripest cherries. The cherries are depulped beans, depending on the variation, are placed in sealed, airtight tanks or containers, and it creates an environment devoid of oxygen. Therefore, anaerobic means without oxygen. Controlled fermentation. Inside the sealed tanks, fermentation occurs through the action of naturally present microorganisms like yeast and bacteria. Without oxygen, unique metabolic pathways are activated, producing different acids, alcohols, and esters. These compounds significantly influence the flavor profile of the coffee. Temperature, time, and pH levels are carefully monitored and controlled during the process. There's a process called glycolysis that actually is what they're talking about here. Okay, after fermentation, the coffee beans are removed from the tanks and dried. Depending on the producer, the beans can be dried in their whole cherry form with mucilage, like as in honey style of processing, or after the parchment has been removed, like the wash process. Drying is done either in the sun or using mechanical dryers. Once the coffee is fully dried, the outer layers, if still present, are removed and the green beans are sorted and prepared for export or roasting. The anaerobic process results in extraordinarily complex and vibrant flavor profiles. We had a tasting event this past Saturday, and this was one of the coffees that we had people taste. Some of them were just blown away at how the flavor notes were so pronounced. They'd never had a coffee like that before. But the anaerobic process brings that out. Coffees processed this way have unique and bold tasting notes, including tropical fruits, spices, and even funky or fermented characteristics. That's not a bad thing. It sounds bad, but it's not a bad thing. It's a method that allows producers to experiment and create highly distinctive coffee experiences. I want to go over one more processing method. Okay, and it's the monsoon method. You may have heard of India Monsoon Malabar coffee. And the way this works, it goes all the way back to when they first started shipping coffees out of India and shipping them to Europe, because they had to sail all the way around Africa to get to Europe. That voyage took about 6 months. During that time, the coffee beans were exposed to that salty, humid sea air, and it actually changed the color of the beans. So they get to Europe, and it's like, oh shit, the beans are a different color. I hope they're still good. Well, they roasted them up, and it produced a very mellow, smooth cup of coffee, and the Europeans loved it. Today, they don't have to sail all the way around Africa to get to Europe. They just go through the Suez Canal. But they are replicating the process. They take naturally processed coffee beans from all over India, and they place them on beds on the Arabian Sea, on the coast. And they leave them out there for up to 16 weeks, so that salty, humid sea air still gets on those beans and still produces a fantastic coffee. Anyway, so to summarize, the natural method often produces a flavor profile that is fruity, wine-like, and earthy. It's got a full body with low acidity, and it's very complex. Okay, the unique traits: the beans are dried inside the cherry, transferring the fruit flavors to the coffee. The wet hold processing method: earthy, herbal, rustic flavor profiles, full-bodied, low to medium acidity, moderate complexity, and it's distinctive to Indonesia, where the hold while the beans are still wet. The wash process: clean, bright, floral flavor profile, light to medium body, high acidity. Let's touch on acidity real quick. The opposite of bright acidity in a coffee is sour. Nobody wants a sour coffee. Okay, so acidity is not a bad thing in coffee. Okay. The wash process, the characteristics are the highlights intrinsic characteristics of the bean rather than the fruit. Okay, the honey process, we talked about that. Sweet, syrupy, balanced flavor profile, medium to full body with medium acidity and balanced complexity. The anaerobic process produces a bold, tropical, spiced, funky flavor profile. The body is medium to full, medium to high acidity, very complex. And again, this unique fermentation is sealed oxygen-free tanks, produces those bold and vibrant flavors. So there's a lot of different ways that coffees are processed. Unfortunately, you can't just pick it off the tree, throw it in a roaster, and start drinking coffee. So anyway, I wanted to share those with you. If you got any questions, please put them in the comments. I'd be happy to ask them. Go ahead and like this video and subscribe to the channel. We're putting together more content like this all the time. And it'd be great to have you. Please like and subscribe, and take care.